Hey everybody, it's Rabbi Shmuel Pon. I hope you're all doing well. We got a big topic for you today. It's the topic of God Himself. We haven't talked about God in a little while, and I want to make sure that everybody who's new to the channel gets to hear my take on God. And my contention is that there is only one God and that God is perfectly one. And I base this on certain assumptions. We have to have assumptions in place before we make an argument, right? So here we go. Things don't create themselves. That's assumption number one. Assumption number two. Witnesses are a valid way to prove whether something happened. Number three, the principles that apply to the universe also apply to man who is part of the universe. I think these are all pretty simple, basic assumptions that we all can agree upon. And from there, we'll take it further towards the argument itself. So the first thing that we must recognize is what I just said, that things don't create themselves. We have a universe with 1 trillion galaxies that does not just pop out of nowhere. If something exists, it must have come from somewhere and something. The first thing the Bible does is explain to us where everything came from. Where the moon and the sun came from, where the grass came from, where man came from, because that's the big question. Where did it come from? And we know it had to come from somewhere because things don't just create themselves, and it's illogical. It's absolutely 100% illogical to say that it came from nothing. Nothing comes from nothing. So it absolutely came from something, someone, some being that I will call God, even though I'm not making any claims about what kind of God he is, whether it's a Hindu God, a Buddhist God, a Muslim God, or a Jewish God, Christian God. Can't leave out the Christians. It must exist. Something like that must exist, like what they're talking about, or else things wouldn't be here. We're talking about a universe with it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter if we're talking about one small thing that I'm holding in my hand, one little key or something like that. The key had to come from somewhere. The key doesn't create itself. Everything needs to come from something. And then you'll say, well, where did God come from? Okay, that's a snarky, smart question, a very tricky question, and there are answers to that which we can give in another video, but I don't want to bore everyone with a question like that. It must come from something. We know that. So there's a creator, and the question is that creator one? Because I'm saying the creator is one. Well, let's look at this. If you just look at the universe more and more deeply, you will find more and more unity. Scientists are looking for the theory of everything. That means they know that there is one thing that can explain everything. We start out with 118 elements of the periodic table of elements. Then we go zoom in further and we see, no, they're just atoms that have 3 parts. Then we zoom in further and no, it's just quarks. Then we zoom in further and we know it's just preons. We go further and further until we wind up with just raw existence. There's no distinctions when you get deep enough into reality. It just exists, and it's absolutely, absolutely always one. It's always one thing, because the closer you get, the more the distinctions disappear, and you wind up with just unity. So we know that God, the creator, who is behind this universe, is one, because when we look at the universe, that's what we see. We see it's created, it's all being controlled and created by oneness. So let's go on. And we know from looking at man, that's another way to look at it, and man is part of the universe, that if we look into man deeper and deeper into his soul, things become more united, because we have all these different personalities we take on, we have all these roles we take on, and we think the glass is half empty, then we think the glass is half full, we think we're a Republican, we think we're a Democrat. And it goes on and on. But if you look deeper into the person, you say, no, he just wants things to work out well. If I go closer into who I really am, I just want things to be good. That's the only thing I want. So all this different stuff became one thing, which is good. So the good, which is the deeper meaning, the deeper desire, deeper into ourselves, becomes one. If we go deeper and deeper, we can say, I want good and I want bad. I want both. I want to be able to do both. So at that point, the distinction between good and bad has disappeared, and we have just the one thing, which is our soul, which just exists. And through that soul, we can do anything. And saying you can do anything is basically saying you have the unity. Because saying you can do anything is saying there's no distinction between A and B and C and D. There's no distinction. I can do each one of them equally because I can do anything. So saying you can do anything and saying it's one is the same thing. And we, human beings, we know from the Olympics, from so many different things and the challenges that we faced in our lives in the world, that we can accomplish anything and we can withstand anything and we can be anything that we want to be. Everybody knows that. Hopefully your mother taught you that, your father taught you that. You can be anything. The deepest part of your soul is one. Therefore, it has no distinctions. Therefore, you can do whatever you want. And lastly, we have to discuss Sinai. Did Sinai happen? So I'm saying that witnesses are a valid way to tell if something happened. At Sinai, we are told that in front of 600,000 men, from 20 to 60, and 3 million people in total, that God revealed himself at Mount Sinai amid thunder and lightning, and the Jews' souls took flight because there was so much pleasure there, and they came back and they were revived 2 times. A whole story of Sinai, and the question is, did it happen? So all we have to do is look to the witness nation, the Jewish people. We look into their families, go back a couple of generations, and you'll find that every single Jewish family believed in this revelation of God at Sinai. They all agreed on when it happened, how it happened, and what the commandments were that we were given, and they followed those commandments. Only in the past couple generations has there been creeping in of absolute ignorance that people don't know about the account of Sinai. But the fact is, witnesses count. Witnesses are a valid way to describe, to prove that something actually happened. And we have 3 million witnesses to say that Sinai happens. There's never been an event that had this many witnesses all at the same time, all live. Some will tell me there have been Hindu gatherings that had more people, but that was not a gathering in which people claimed that they saw God. This is the event where people all say they saw God. Very hard to create a conspiracy to get 3 million people to all believe they saw God when they didn't. That would be pretty tough. But that's what happened. We have these witnesses. We have the Jewish witness nation. They all believed in the same thing. Therefore, we can say with some conviction that Sinai actually happened. And the first thing that God says in the 10 Commandments, that when he reveals himself and communicates with us, is that you shouldn't have idols. In other words, don't have other gods, only have one God. So the first thing that God does, he tells you you should come out of, he'll take you out of Egypt, which is all your limitations, and that's because of the unity that he provides in your soul. But the other thing that he tells you is that don't worship idols. There's no validity to idols. There's no power to idols. It's stupidity. So only worship one God, the God of Sinai, the God of the Bible. When the Jews were in Egypt, they were under very difficult slavery, very difficult circumstances. And Moses came and said, God's ready to take you out of Egypt. And their first question was, what God? What kind of God let us go through all of this? What is the name of this God? What is the nature of this God? We want to know who he is. And Moses asked God, and God came back with the answer. And the answer was, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. I will be what I will be. In other words, God did not give him a definition because God has no definition. He's total oneness. So he said, I will be what I will be. In other words, everything that happens in this world just is. My microphone just is. My bag just is. My chairs just are. We put labels on everything, and this is good, this is bad, this is black, this is white. But black and white are just words. They're just words. They're not a reality. So if you want to live in reality, you got to understand that things just exist, and you'll be a much better person and a much more harmonious and united and person if you will understand that things just are. Because people have questions. Why do bad things happen to good people? And there really is no answer, because all we can say is just it was an intense experience, it was reality, and it happened. It is what it is. We cannot say why this happened. We can only say it is what it is. That logically there's no explanation. There's no reason why bad things should happen to good people. The only thing we can say is that it happened. That's the fact. And it's one. And when you sort of look at your trauma like that, or whatever you're dealing with, and you realize that it's just an event that happened, there's no labels that I can attach to good, bad, destructive, constructive. All these labels don't really matter. Only the oneness matters. Only the fact that it just is. And it's such a freeing, unbelievable state to be in, to look at the world and be totally present and realize that everything just is what it is and it has no labels. Get rid of the labels, and we'll talk about how you can actually come back to the labels, but not in the way that you would think. So God has no distinction. God has no definition. Pure unity. Everything is pure unity. There is no logical explanation to anything, because at the end of the day, it just is. Now, we must note that God can take on a form if he wants to. We're not allowed to worship forms because that's not who he truly is, but he can take on a form. Like Moses saw him with the phylacteries and the knot in the back of the phylacteries, and he looked like an old man with a white beard. God can be an old man with a white beard. If he can do anything, he can certainly be something. He can make a rock that he can't lift. He can be anything that he wants. Therefore, he can be a finite form. But please remember, when he takes that form, that is not who he is. He's dressing up like that. He's playing that. It's like if somebody's pretending to be angry, but they're really not angry. That's the way you're supposed to get angry, according to Maimonides. You're supposed to only pretend you're angry. And God is pretending to be a guy with a white beard because it may bring some comfort to the person because it's something they're more familiar with and it's just a way to relate to God. But that's just temporary, and that's just something that he puts on. It's a costume that he puts on for a moment, and then he will go back to being a complete unity after that, a complete undefined unity. Now, this is the first step, to know that there is a God and to know that he is one. And now you have to start to communicate with that God. And you want him to communicate to you, which is why I demand that you watch the video in the description about the beginner's guide to prophecy. That's going to help you start communicating with God and get him communicating with you. You're going to build that relationship, and the more you build that relationship, the closer you'll get, and the closer you become to God, the more powerful you become, because he is the source of power. He is the source of all energy. If you want more energy, if you want more power, if you want more peace, if you want more sanity, if you want more love, you want to get closer to God, you want to build this relationship, start talking to him, and have him start talking to you. If we all do this and we become little prophets in our own right, we will bring this world into a state that God is really happy with, and it's going to be a state of perfection and a state of completion that will bring about the era of the Messiah, and may it happen immediately in our days. God bless.